Just when you thought it was safe to go out into the sun, welcome to the depths. Welcome to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you so much for joining me yet again. Today, I have a review of A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enríquez, translated by Megan McDowell. This is being published on the 17th of September, and I received a complimentary copy in exchange for an honest review. Now, this is a collection of 12 short stories from Mariana Enríquez, who is an Argentinian author who is most well known, at least in America, for the novel Our Share of Night. And I was really looking forward to this collection. And the reason for that is, when I read Our Share of Night, I was a little bit behind everyone else, and I heard all the hype of how amazing it was. And I read it, and I enjoyed it, but I was also a little bit let down. Because the hype was so big, I think was one reason, but also I just felt like it was a little bit too long. Like that was a big, chunky book, and I thought it did not need to go on as long as it did. And so what to begin next? This collection of 12 short stories. And I can say with confidence that I enjoyed every one of these stories. I think they are incredible. Her artistry in writing is really, really profound. You know, these stories are lyrical, they're contemplative, they are very deliberate, you know, and we call this horror, and it is horror, and it's horror, but there isn't a lot of spectacle. What is being explored is the horror of the human, right? And there is some spectacle, there is some action, there is a little bit of gore and gruesomeness just here and there, like little pops of color. But for the most part, there's just this constant underlying threat, this sense of dread or danger, and that pulls you through. And there's some supernatural elements, but mostly it's the human elements that are scariest. And when they interact with these supernatural or potentially supernatural elements, then there are little explosions of like traditional horror, but really the feeling is what pulls you through. The writing is so incredibly, really, really luxurious and beautiful. And so credit has to go to Megan McDowell, the translator, as well as to Mariana Enríquez. This is an advanced reader copy, so I'm not supposed to be reading quotes, but just as an example, a very, very small example of how beautiful the writing is. In one of the later stories, there's a line that says, "But coffins are also just fancy boxes made to lock away what we need to forget in order to move on." You know, that is this kind of writing. It's lush, it is dense, it's very evocative, you know, and it's very gothic in many ways. It really sets a tone. And I will say all of these stories, there are 12 of them, have a very similar tone, a similar ethos in the way they look at the world. So if you read them all in one go, you know, there is a little bit of similarity, but not in content. The stories themselves are actually really wildly different, but the feeling is the same. The sense of dread coupled with really beautiful Gothic language that is poetic and deliberate, as I mentioned earlier. So that is all very similar. So it's nice to kind of spread these out, I think, because the content is different enough that you get something different from every story, even though they kind of circle around a lot of the similar ideas. A big thing is exploring the distinction between the urban and the rural divide in Argentina, and the difference between the rural peoples and people in Buenos Aires. So you often have this discussion of what it means to be a city person or someone who's out in a small town. And through this, there's this constant musing on grief and trauma and family and prejudice, inequality, social expectations, you know, what it means to be in a world that isn't made for you, you know? So a lot of these kind of heavy themes permeate all of the stories. The stories are short, but they each give you so much to feast on, you know, each one is a feast, really. And so I can't recommend them enough. Yet they are dark, they are foreboding, they don't hold your hand. As a horror collection, I think it's really well done. I think all the stories are unique, even if they have a similar tone. They each bring something different to the table. I enjoyed every one. There are two stories that stood out for me. One is called Different Colors Made of Tears, and this is exploring the legacy of violence and hatred, and to some extent, the vitriol that can happen when a domestic relationship goes bad, and how that legacy of violence and misogyny can start small and then infect everything around it. that story was really, really compelling and really gripping. Another story that I really enjoyed is called Nightbirds. And of the 12, this one has some of the more kind of grotesque imagery. I'd still say it's more contemplative than spectacle, but it does have some imagery that is a little bit off-putting. And this one is interested in ideas of, well, it questions reality in many ways. You are left right at the beginning not knowing what is real. So, and there's explorations of mental health and mental well-being. And really, at the same time, it's exploring the tyranny of family dynamics, right? Of what it means to be powerless in a community that is supposed to be supporting you, but is only hurting you instead, either willfully hurting you or hurting you through their ignorance. So, the tyranny of family in many ways, or the tyranny of people that don't understand you, don't have your well-being in mind, right? Who only care about themselves, and how that works with the idea of your own mental well-being. So that is Nightbirds. That also plays with ideas of folklore. I wouldn't say it has any folk horror ideas, but it definitely plays with folklore and the intersection between our understanding of reality and our ancestors' understanding of reality and how those work together. So those are two stories that stood out for me. Different colors, Made of Tears and Nightbirds. But truly, every story in this collection is strong. And they're the kind of story that you're going to want to read again and again. Now, having read all of them, I have the luxury of being able to go back and just read one of them here or there and know that it is giving me a full meal. It is giving me so much to think about. And a lot of these ideas and tropes are very common in like upmarket horror, right? Exploring grief and trauma and loss and prejudice and so forth. But she does it so well, and the language itself is so beautiful, and every story is able to have like a full arc. None of them feel incomplete. None of the stories feel just like an idea that is not rounded. So every story has characters that you can relate to. They don't feel like archetypes. They don't feel like generic. Every character, even in these very short stories, feel like genuine. They feel like real people. Many of them coming from impoverished or marginalized communities or identities. There's great queer representation throughout these stories, not in every story, but in numerous stories. Even in this format of short fiction, she makes these really compelling, interesting, engaging, complicated characters. And then she takes them on a full story arc in just a few short pages for every story. As a collection, there isn't one essential theme or idea that pulls them all together. There is a tone, a kind of ethos, a way of looking at the world that you can see underlining all of them. There's a constant sense of threat or dread, but there's no central theme. And I think the stories are stronger for that. I will say, if you're just going on tone alone, they do get a little samey. You need to break them up a little bit to get the most out of them, because their tone is always so bleak and so dark and so kind of poetic that if you just go from one story to the next, then they kind of run into each other. But if you take the time to spread them out and to enjoy them slowly at their own pace, then there is definitely a whole lot to get out of this collection. Have any of you had a chance to read anything else by Mariana Enríquez, either in its native language or in translation? What do you think of any of these stories, or what do you think of Our Share of Night? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Otherwise, that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I appreciate you. Be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.